Welcome to the Training Stimulus podcast. Today we are rejoined by a very special guest, Dr. Megan Clayton. We previously did an episode on how to use breath work or breathing to improve your fitness. And today we get further into breathing and breathing mechanics and how it affects so much of our health and fitness. You will learn how to assess your own breathing mechanics and work on and improve them to improve your fitness, but also your posture and your digestion even. And we'll also talk about how you can use breath work to address burnout and also what you can do to train your body's resilience against fatigue. So when you get all sloppy at the end of a workout or a run, what can we do to combat that with a focus on breath as well? I learned a ton from this episode, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will do as well. So pay attention, and if you get a chance to watch it on video, there's a few mini demonstrations Megan gives. She describes them very well, but if you have the option to watch it, I think you'll get a little bit more out of it as well. But that's enough for me. Let's get into it. Megan, how are you doing?
Great, Ash. It's good to see you again.
Likewise, I'm glad we got to do a part two. Yeah, we've got loads to talk about today. I think last time we covered loads of fascinating stuff and the idea of using breath work to improve your fitness. Today, where should we start? I think maybe for the listeners who are very fit and active, how might breathing patterns link to movement patterns and dysfunction in one causing the other? What do you tend to see here?
Okay. Well, this is an interesting question. And I like that last time we were talking about kind of fitness and breathing in the sense of cellular metabolism and homeostasis in the body. But now we're going more into biomechanics, and you're starting it off directly. So one first way that breathing is going to impact your movement patterns is this very famous muscle, the diaphragm. And most muscle chains in the body, and actually, let me just change that to all muscle chains in the body, are going to pass through the diaphragm. It's the center, it's part of our core. And whether they're diagonal muscle chains or straight lines, front line or back line, your diaphragm is going to be involved because it's going to help with your stability and the way that the tonus of the barrel in your abdomen holds together as you move and breathe, and you can brace to protect your spine and also create dynamic movement in the spine. So that is one thing. And because there are many other muscles involved in breathing, those muscles, of course, they have a role in breathing, but they're going to have a role in other types of movement. For example, the core is involved in many, many types of movement. The accessory muscles like scalenes or levator scapulae or other shoulder muscles, pectoral muscles, these have different roles as well. So if you're using them dysfunctionally in breathing, they might become dysfunctional and have compensatory actions in other movements of the body. And then additionally, thirdly, if your muscles are not able to activate in a harmonious way while you're breathing, of course, we're breathing while we do exercises as well, or while we do daily movements, because we are breathing, or we should be at least breathing all the time, except for in specific situations like swimming, where we need to be in apnea, or if we're lifting, we're controlling when we inhale and exhale, but that's a whole another topic. But if we do have dysfunctional movement patterns, those will affect us. For example, when we're walking, if we're not activating a certain muscle, it'll cause breakdown in that muscle chain.
Is it sort of a chicken or egg situation where one can cause the other, or the other?
Absolutely. So postural issues, if you're having posture problems or movement problems, then those can actually cause you to have breakdown in your breathing patterns as well.
And how would somebody figure out that they have dysfunctional breathing patterns?
Well, it can show up in a lot of different ways. It could show up as a pain pattern. It could show up as an inability to coordinate movements. Or, for example, if someone's training in the gym, doing some kettlebell exercises, an inability to swing on an inhale, or no, it would be to push up on an exhale and then swing on an exhale, those kinds of things, being able to coordinate movement, you might be able to notice those and think, okay, there might be a breakdown in my breathing. And then you can get some observation from a professional to isolate that and see what's happening.
Cool. And what are the sort of common presentations that you see when people turn up with some sort of dysfunctional breathing pattern?
Well, it is interesting because usually when people show up in my office, they don't know that they have a dysfunctional breathing pattern.
Mm.
But very, very often it's like, oh, I really, my neck is so sore. My trapezius muscles are so sore. That's a very, very common one because we have the first and second ribs in that area, the scalenes inserting, and also these accessory breathing muscles that are around the mid to lower cervicals, the mid to lower neck, and the upper shoulders. So that's a big one. Another presentation would be generalized tension. They
Mm.
just say, "Oh, I just feel so tight." And not only does that come from this dysfunctional breathing of shallow breathing, so the lower neck and trapezius would be dysfunctional in the sense that they're breathing a little bit too much in these high accessory muscles. But then this generalized tension could come from, and often does come from, people with shallow breathing because they're not using the full amplitude of the muscles.
Mm.
But also, shallow breathing can cause acidity in the body, and so it's causing the muscles to just clench up, and it's just like a tight, slow, jerky movements like this.
Mm.
Um, what else? Other dysfunctional breathing patterns. There are so many symptoms that could be caused from this. So, for example, digestive problems could show up because you're not taking full breaths with the diaphragm. So, you're not getting that mechanical kind of massage of the abdominal muscles. You could start to have poor circulation
Mm.
because also that mechanical massage of the abdomen is not helping the blood flow back up, the venous blood flow. Low back pain, it can also come from dysfunctional breathing when, for example, within the core muscles, if you have an overactive quadratus lumborum muscle, this muscle that links up the rib cage and the pelvis in the back. If that's overly tight, you could have dysfunction in the different layers of the ab muscles, so the obliques, rectus abdominis, transverse abdominis, and often what you would see is just a flaring transverse abdominis that doesn't want to bring back basically the belly button toward the spine. So there's so many possibilities, but those are some of the common ones that I see.
That's really cool. And I think hopefully many of the listeners will be familiar with some of those presentations. And the common one that I think a lot of people will relate to is the neck and shoulder breathing. Like you said, your traps and your neck muscles are pulling on your first and second rib, trying to expand upwards. What are the common causes of that? And are there any simple steps we can take to address that? If somebody's like, yeah, I definitely breathe with my neck and shoulders and I'm always up here, what can somebody do to improve that situation?
Hmm. Well, you can correct that by working on shoulder stability, strengthening the shoulders downward, because often, basically, these people present with carrying the shoulders quite high. It comes from desk work and stress
Mm.
very often. So, working on the things that lower, so that neurologically will get the shoulder elevating muscles to release a little bit more. And releasing the scalenes. So also working on cervical mobility with shoulder stability. So like for example, in planks, holding, turning the head with the cervicals aligned, and taking full rounds of breaths in the both rotations. That can be very
Mm.
helpful. So just neurokinetically readdressing those movement patterns, inhibiting everything that's lifting the shoulders, and then activating things that would help to stabilize and lower,
Nice.
and then freeing up the ribs by releasing scalenes.
Nice. And the other thing that came through when you're talking through the various different presentations is what's the checklist for good breathing mechanics? What do we want to see in somebody who has the optionality, at least, to breathe very well?
Okay. So, firstly, we would want to be able to see that the person can maintain their posture through the entire cycle of the breath, or maintain whatever movement, your functional movement that you're trying to execute through the entire range of the breath. And then also that they're breathing into all areas of the lungs if they're trying to execute a full breath. Um, Sorry, let me just correct that. Not yes, fully into the lungs, but fully into the different areas that we think of breathing into: the belly, low chest, and upper chest. In order to execute a full breath, we should be able to breathe into all three of them, not just one or the other.
Mm. And with that 3-stage breath, is there a sequence to it, an ideal sequence as well, or does that vary by the situation?
It's true that it would vary by the situation. Generally, we would look for breathing into the belly first, because that's going to indicate activation of the diaphragm first and foremost, as well as the core muscles, which are our primary respiration muscles. And then starting to breathe into the upper chest, which are our accessories. So they would come last. But it's going to be specific, definitely, to your exercises. So, for example, if you're lifting heavy weights, you would be bracing in the abdomen. So, of course, there would be a little bit of an activation of the diaphragm, but very little movement in the core, because you're going to be bracing so hard. I'm thinking of like heavyweight lifting champions
Mm.
right now that they're even wearing belts to keep the core in. So they would be breathing much more into the low ribs first, and then the upper chest. And then another example is kind of gymnasts or yogis, as they're doing postures that are bringing the body into a kind of contorted movement, or a movement with torsion, that would also inhibit breathing into the belly first. So you would see changes in the activation of the muscles.
Okay, so if somebody's in like a big twist, then the ability to expand the diaphragm and the belly would be reduced.
Would be less, and you would still want to generally follow that order of belly, mid chest, and upper chest, but you're going to see so much smaller movement that it's going to be a smaller ratio of the full breath in that position,
I
if that
see.
makes sense.
Yeah, and is that kind of a tool to improve expansion in the mid and upper chest?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can use different positions to explore different areas of the breath as well. So if you think of a side bend, for example, gate pose in yoga, you would use this to expand and explore breathing on the side that is lengthened or in the air. And that would be absolutely a tool to explore, for example, in that situation, breathing between the ribs in an area that usually is not as open. And also because the spine will be in a different alignment, then you're able to explore movement in the ribs. So if you think of also back bends, this is good, like a really good example, because you're going to have the ribs spread much more than when you're standing or folding forward. And so you'll explore the breath on the front side of the rib, but then when you're folding forward, you'd be able to explore the breath on the back side of the rib cage.
Mm. I think that's something that gets talked about a lot nowadays in the movement and rehab communities of like stiff ribs and not being able to expand certain parts of the abdomen or rib cage.
Mhm.
From what you see, what do you see as the typical reasons why somebody can show up with unable to expand the front side of the rib cage or the back side of the rib cage?
Mm. The front side of the rib cage, I have this reaction of like, oh, because it's quite like this kind of like sad, hunched forward posture. And so, um, in, I mean, the mood really affects the posture. And so I have this image of, kind of a patient suffering from depression that has a folding forward chest. And then they would have limited expansion of the rib cage, for sure. But it could be many things. Post-operative, for example, I have seen people with celeoscopic operations where you put cameras and air into the abdomen and blow it up, basically so that they can operate with space in the abdomen. That, of course, is going to stretch the abdominal muscles
Yeah.
extremely.
Wow.
And then it takes a while for the muscles to work it out afterward to activate correctly. But then also you're going to have scarring in the abdominal muscles, so they don't know how to activate correctly. And so not only would you see the abdominal muscles, like those different layers of the obliques and the transverse abdominis and those being disrupted, but also the pelvic floor, because the pelvic floor no longer has the correct tension from the abdomen to work off of it, so it gets a little bit lazy, and then you can see tightening in the back. So after those types of operations, and also pregnancy, for example, that this is why we do rehab of the pelvic floor and the core, because you need to get them to both work together so that they basically have each other to play off of with that correct tonus.
Mm, yeah, I think there's so many implications from, well, so many reasons that it can happen in the first place, but then so many implications if it is happening that certain parts of the abdomen are not expanding. For from a training and exercise perspective, what are the consequences that people really care about? Because I think I see this as very important, but somebody who doesn't have my perspective might be like, well, why should I care that my anterior rib cage is not expanding very well? What does that actually mean for me?
Mm.
My posture doesn't look as good as it could.
Yeah, well, there's always the aesthetic side, but because you want to be standing straight and have a large, confident chest. But also, if your front rib cage is not opening, then those alveoli in your lungs are not um, able to open as well either. So the tissues of your lungs are not going to be used optimally, and so they won't be regenerating in the same way. But also, then when they're not being used properly, then we don't have the same gas exchange. We don't have the same turnover of cells and of basically the mucus that's lining the inside of the body. And so then you get buildup, and it's just not a healthy situation for the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Then also, if you're not using your lungs efficiently, all the different parts and the different lobes, then your breath is just, it's not going to be as efficient going into the blood in the body as well, because you have this whole circulation of blood going to the lungs. And so if they're only picking up oxygen from some areas, you're
Mm,
not going to have the blood flow that you need.
yeah, that's yeah. I think it's underestimated how much systemic impact it can have that you're only breathing into certain parts of your lungs. And
Mhm.
from a movement perspective, are there any consequences of somebody not breathing very well? Do they lose mobility? Do they lose access to certain positions, or does it
Mm.
cause pain for some people?
Absolutely. So you can have those kind of contractures in the muscles of the upper shoulders, like we spoke about, But then also when you do have the breakdowns in the chain, the muscle chains, then you're not going to be able to execute movements functionally. The image that comes to mind is a squat. So if you have a compressed rib cage, you're not going to be able to keep the straight back as you go down, and you're going to have that breakdown in the core because you're in flexion, and your squats will suffer because your back chain will be breaking down. You won't be able to rely on your glutes, and also that deep squat. I don't know if you see what I'm saying, and as deep squats, when the glutes and the pelvis just rolls forward and the person is in flexion and they come back up.
The prawn
You
squat.
don't want to see that under. That's what?
The prawn squat.
Prawn squat. Yeah. I like that. It's a good image. So you don't want a prawn squat under load. That is just not good for your vertebrae. And I have seen, and I know I see it in my office because it's a presentation for chiropractic care, but the broken backs and hernias from dysfunctional squatting, there's way too many. And you don't want to be one, because then you won't be squatting under load very much.
Yeah. I think that's a very common presentation, where people just are stuck in flexion and have got no way to expand that anterior chain. Like you see a lot of people with tight abs as well, but their sort of bottom rib seems to be glued to their pelvis, and there's no lengthening happening in the front of the core either, and it's just one big flexion, one big piece of flexion. So if somebody is wanting to breathe very well, what process should they go through to work on their 3-stage breath to make sure they're expanding all the areas of their lungs and getting all the benefits of a good breath cycle?
Well, a good way to test, first of all, to see if you can activate and can open in those 3 different parts, is to lie down so that you don't have the weight of gravity on the different structures. It just makes it a little bit easier to see what is going on. So if you lie on your back, bend your knees, place a hand on your belly and one on your chest, and take a normal breath and see what moves, then you'll notice, is my belly going first? Is my chest going next? And then if you move to a full breath, you can see to what extent they expand as well. So that's one first thing to touch and feel. But then if you place your hands on the side of your rib cage, still while you're lying down, you'll see if they do expand sideways. And so that's a really good way to check in. And then once you've done that and noticed, am I breathing into my belly first and then my rib cage, and then seeing what the amplitudes are, then move to a seated position in a chair, I would say, to start off with, because again, it's a little bit easier than in a cross-legged on the floor, because that's going to implicate your pelvic muscles and kind of pull on things. So start in a chair with the feet both on the floor and do the same thing. So just take a natural breath without trying to think about it too much. See if your belly and your chest move and which one does first. Then place those hands on the side again. See if you have the same amplitude of movement as when you were lying down, because if you don't, then there's probably something postural that is inhibiting the proper activation of your muscles. This could be, again, scalenes to get tight, because when you sit up, your neck is tight and you don't have the same ability to relax and lift the cervicothoracic hinge, or a multitude of things. Then finally, again, do it standing, and then you'll see as well what those differences are in which muscles activate first, which areas you breathe into first and second and third, and then what the amplitudes are. And then there are different measures as well, and this will be really dependent on the morphology, shape of the person, the sex of the person, how these different areas of the rib cage and the abdomen move. But you can actually measure them. So if you take a slack measuring tape, you can put it around your abdomen and breathe all the way out actively. so that you just have the residual air in your lungs, and then take a deep breath in. It'll also depend on if you've had lunch yet, but then see what the centimeter difference is in your abdomen. Wrap it around your lower rib cage. Do that again. So breathe all the way out so that you just have the residual air, and then breathe in. See what the centimeter difference is, and then do it around the top as well. And it's really interesting because we did this in one training that I did for breath work or breathing. And over the course of the training, those differences changed a lot, like by matters of centimeters.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. It's not just a given thing that you were born with. Like I'm a belly breather, I'm a chest breather. These are things that you can work on. They are skeletal muscles, so they're going to respond to mobilization, stretching, and strengthening.
Very, very cool. I think I'm definitely going to be doing that later, and I'm sure lots of the listeners will too. One question I just thought of that I'd love to get your take on is for the belly breath. Some people talk about it as pushing your belly out, and other people talk about it as a descension of the diaphragm. So you're sort of breathing down. Is it one or the other? Is it both? What's your
It's both. It's indications, because it makes me think of I had a patient walk in, and she was having shoulder pain because she was standing like this. I said, "Well, what's is something painful in between your shoulders?" And she said, "No, my doctor told me to stand with my shoulders back." And so I've done this for years. I'm like, "Oh no, this is just a malinterpretation of a good advice." But it's the same with the breathing. So if they're saying when that you breathe down, you're basically saying push your diaphragm down. And so again, if you think of your core as a barrel, you have the pelvic floor, the core and back muscles, and then your diaphragm. This cylinder, how it functions is the diaphragm comes down, it pushes on the visceral organs, and then pushes it out forward. If your pelvic floor is slack, it'll also push down on your pelvic floor like this. We don't want to see that, because we want to see a maintained tonus in the entire barrel of our abdomen. So we would see expansion in the chest, but the pelvic floor and the core are going to co-activate. So they're going to work together. And again, that like interplay between the core and the pelvic floor, it should be able to stabilize dynamically, so that as you breathe in, they're both holding each other together. And then as you breathe out, they're both contracting and holding each other together. And it's really the diaphragm that pushes down that cylinder, like it's like a pump, like a chamber. Yeah. So the diaphragm could be like a trampoline. You could think of it as like going down and up and down and up, or a parachute as it contracts and relaxes. But the image I'm trying to evoke is the whole barrel as a cylinder, and the pump is the diaphragm that pushes down on the other. So the actual intra-abdominal pressure increases and pushes out on the core and the pelvic floor.
Got you. Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing I wanted to come back to from what you said earlier was you were talking about people whose transverse abdominis would not suck in towards the spine. What's going on there? Because I think a lot of people probably have more of a belly than they would like, and they would love it if their TVA was sucked in more to
I would love it if everybody's TVAs were activating more, because this would eliminate a lot of issues, a lot of back issues. So what you can do, so again, lying on the back to get off of load, to look at how different muscles in the core activate. Basically, we would just challenge those muscles and watch a breath and see if the person can actually execute the breath and maintain tonus in those muscles. So one that I do in the office for the pelvic floor is I get them to lie on their back, knees bent. I place a cushion between their knees, ask them to squeeze the cushion and give a light pull on the side of the cushion so that they have to really hold it in place, and then maintain the pull on the cushion. I keep pulling, and then they should breathe in and out. And often, as soon as they get to the top of the inhale, I can pull the cushion away. And so then, because the adductors kind of translate into the pelvic floor here in this circumstance, that's a little test for the pelvic floor activation and ability to hold through the entire amplitude of the breath. So then I would get them to activate that, but I would usually find why can't they activate this muscle. I would search for what muscle is contracting so much that it's blocking the ability to contract the pelvic floor. So it's often something in the back or something in the hips. So I'd find that, release it, and then allow them to activate the pelvic floor a little bit better. So similarly with the transverse abdominis, a challenge that we could create would be lifting the legs, because we're just basically adding, so you're lying on your back, knees bent, and then you would lift the feet off of the ground a little bit. And I would ask them to lift both, just so that we don't confuse it with obliques, because if you lift one leg or the other, then you could confuse it with an oblique. And so then usually with a transverse abdominis or rectus abdominis, they'd start shaking already. They're like trembling and their back curls up and there's this lifting off of the table or the ground. And so you're like, okay, well, we've definitely got a stabilizing muscle in the core not activating. So again, see which muscle is blocking that activation, and then get them to breathe back with the belly button down toward the ground. So if you have hyperextension in the back with your belly kind of forward, and you have this kind of like belly, you want to work on the transverse abdominis, this is something that you can do. You can lie down on your back, keep your feet on the ground, flatten your stomach and back, and then as you exhale, pull the belly button back. And then also, so if you can think of your core as different levels of the core, you have everything below the belly button, and then everything kind of between the rib cage, the sides of the rib cage. So like this area, and then down. If you're on the ground, you exhale to activate the transverse abdominis by pulling back the belly button, but also pull down the lower parts of your belly and the upper parts of your belly. I can see you.
Yeah, I'm playing with it. Yeah. Okay. And so one thing I would like you to clarify for the listeners, you refer to tonus. Is that the same as tone, or is that slightly different?
Yes, I believe it is tone. I think that we just would say tonus in French. Sorry about that.
Okay. No worries.
Muscle tone.
Yeah, got it. So with this work on the TVA and an improved tone or tonus, would somebody's stomach naturally rest more sucked in? Is that what we're getting at? Because this is making me think of old school vacuums that bodybuilders would do, because they're trying to get that drawn in waist and essentially training their core to cinch up. Is that what's going on here?
Well, so this is just another kind of dysfunction. It can be another dysfunction in breathing. And we would call it an inverted breath, because as you breathe in, you're keeping your abdomen in, because you have this hyperactivation of the transverse abdominis. And typically we do see that a lot in women. So we'll this is textbook that women will hold in the stomach and it doesn't move much when they breathe, but they'll breathe a lot in the upper chest, because they're trying to accentuate the size of their chest and limit the size of their belly. I mean, it can also translate into men, and it does translate into men, but this is, medical textbooks, the the dysfunctions in breathing to look for. And why that's problematic is that then we're not activating the diaphragm, we're not having that movement in the abdomen, we're not having that intra-abdominal pressure to help the core be dynamic, we're not also mechanically stimulating the vagus nerve to regulate the nervous system as we have deeper breaths and more shallow breaths, because we're basically always in this shallow breathing. And we don't want to be there throughout the day. So whereas activating and strengthening the transverse abdominis is a very good thing, we should think of that as an exercise to increase the general tone of the muscle, and not as like an indication we always have to have that transverse abdominis tight, because that's not true. We want to be able to execute movements, functional movements, with a harmonious activation of all of the breathing muscles, including diaphragm, transverse abdominis, and all the layers of the core. Because if you think of a dancer, and I can just see this, ballerina just extending and launching through the air, she is not bracing one muscle. She is free, or he is free in all of his movements, and they co-activate in a dynamic way. So yes, we want strong transverse abdominis, but we want strong pelvic floor, we want strong diaphragm, we want strong intercostal muscles as well. And those are actually things that we can develop. So again, skeletal muscles, we can work on lengthening, stretching, and strengthening.
Absolutely, yeah. I think when you refer to them as skeletal muscles, it makes it all the more obvious that you don't want it always on. Because I think some people think with postural muscles, like that lady you were talking about before, who wanted her shoulders back and down the whole time, you want the ability to be there, and maybe you want your average position to be there or thereabouts, but you definitely don't want any muscle on 100% of the time. It needs to be able to fire powerfully, but then also relax fully as well, to give you all your movement options.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up about the postural muscles as well, because we are humans that move, and we are generally, if you're listening to this podcast, we're not monks meditating 24 hours a day. Our tonic muscles and our postural muscles should be able to fire all day, every day, if they wanted to, because they have more slow twitch fibers, and they should be able to do that if they have good tone and they're healthy tissues, and they don't have compensatory phasic type 1 fiber muscles fighting against them. So we should have that ability. However, they're going to dynamically activate and then be a little bit inhibited as we make movements too. So you're right. We should have muscles that know how to turn on and off. And the breath is just something that, it's beautiful because it actually allows us to be that way, because it's a continual process of change in our body. Breathing in and breathing out is this, it's a flow. It's, you hear it and it sounds cliche, but the breath is our flow, and it allows us to be dynamic.
Still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the breath allows us to be dynamic no matter what we're doing. If we're sitting or if we're moving, it's bringing us change all of the time.
Totally. And like something I say, I stand as I record these podcasts, and as I breathe, I can feel my weight shifting in my feet, because there is change going on in my body. It's shifting my center of mass. It's shifting like which part of my rib cage is expanding. And just by virtue of needing to breathe, we have to be constantly in motion, even when we think we're still. And I think that's like a bit of a misconception that a lot of people have, that, even if you're a soldier stood at attention, tensing everything, you're still moving because you're still breathing. It's just
Yeah.
less perceptible than,
Yeah.
if you're running a marathon.
Well, and I get goosebumps, like literally, because this is just so beautiful neurologically, because we are constantly having reminders of where we are in space because the breath is there. It's like you sway, your center of gravity is changing, but you're always coming back because those tonic muscles are dynamically firing. They are like getting feedback and just turning your brain on. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
So grateful for that.
Yeah, totally. It's all one big like incredible network where your proprioception links with your breath, and it's all just giving you feedback. And like you said
Hmm.
there, I think your one analogy I like to give people when I'm explaining proprioception or even balance and standing on your feet is, if you look at an amazing handstand artist or gymnast, when they're inverted and they're on their hands, you can see the micro corrections. There's all these
Hmm.
twitches as they're feeling their body shift a millimeter too far this way or that way, and then they contract this muscle a tiny bit. And that's happening through your whole body all the time. There's these little micro adjustments that you're
Hmm.
turning muscle on a little bit more, off a little bit more, to just keep you where you want to be and try and coordinate you to get whatever job you're trying to get done. And yeah, I'd never really thought about breath being, it's almost like a radar pulse. It's that
Hmm.
expansion and contraction sends a wave through the body to just check in on where everything is and
Hmm.
respond accordingly. That's
It
really cool.
allows your brain basically to always be on because you're getting that information feedback all the time, constantly. And it's I love like the thought of like the ballet dancers just moving through space and seeing, like you're saying, those like minute, like the gymnast, those minute corrections. It's fascinating. If anybody out there wants to take me out for my birthday, I love going to the ballet, because this is the stuff that you see, and the control of mind, body, and the spirit aspect too, because they're able to be in that flow and focused and fully in the body, and allowing those dynamic processes to continually activate while they're executing these really complicated movements.
Totally.
It's,
They're low key some of the best athletes out there, actually. Like some of the, I can't remember which one I saw a few years ago, but the male gymnasts have got like legs like racehorses, and the jumps they're able to do are like
yeah.
as good as anything I've seen in the sporting world, apart from obviously dedicated jumpers. But the height,
Mhm.
distance, poise, control, balance is absolutely astonishing. So highly
Yeah.
recommend that as well if anyone gets a chance.
Yeah. And sometimes movement without load is even harder
Hmm.
to execute. Like, if, for example, I work with a lighter kettlebell because I find it so difficult because I'm very flexible, and so it forces me to really focus on that stabilized movement. And then when you add a load, it's like, okay, got this. The muscles are activating.
100%.
Uh,
This is one of the key principles that we teach when we're looking at movement mechanics. Is, well, there's a few reasons why, but the main one being co-contraction, in that if you have a heavy load to brace against, you get
mhm,
so much more feedback that you can
mhm,
brace against it, create stability. Whereas if you have to create that stability yourself, it can be more work, especially for flexible or people who tend towards hypermobility. So the
mhm,
progression for those people is actually using lighter and lighter weights rather than heavier and
mhm,
heavier weights.
mhm.
And it's another one of
Totally.
those things that kind of flips the script for some people. um, I think that's a nice point to jump off. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was how you can build neurological resilience. So when we're looking at these movement patterns and breathing patterns, I think everybody is aware that there's a point of fatigue where things start to break down, and
Mhm,
you get a little bit sloppy, you get inaccurate if you're playing a sport.
mhm.
How can we work with our mind and body to um, improve our resilience against that breakdown?
Mm. Okay. So there are many ways. This is such a good question because it's going to bring up lots of things. But when dysfunction starts to develop, and I'll just talk about breath because that's where we're kind of our touch point for today. For example, in the breath, if I have a dysfunction in my anterior rib cage and it's kind of giving me a concave kind of posture, what I would want to do is first address the bodily reason, the biomechanical reasons why that's happening. So, building up strength in that area. And one way that you can do it is actually using resistance. So, I would say step one, because it's easier to work against something that's giving you feedback, start to build up the places where you're having breakdown in the breath with a little bit of resistance. So for the belly, what you can do is you can actually lie on your back and place a little weight on there. And don't start too heavy because you want to gently test the strength of your diaphragm. But I've worked with sandbags on my stomach, or when I don't have a sandbag handy, I use a kettlebell as well. And I use that to have a force to push against for the diaphragm. So I'm like, okay, hey, here it is. Here's the diaphragm. I can activate it. And also so that the muscle develops and becomes stronger. So you can also do that on the low rib cage by using an elastic. So you can tie an elastic around and stabilize it, or use one of these the little hip ones if your rib cage is large enough. It's better for guys. And breathing against that in that area. You can also simply just place your hands on the side and push against, and then lying down on the chest, a little bit of pressure and pushing against it. You can also do it with a partner if you trust them, with very light pressure. Don't push too hard on the ribs. They are thin bones. So these are ways that you can start to develop strength and awareness because you have that feedback. Proprioception is very often just a relative information. So it's every information is like relative to where you are in space or relative to a force that is being applied to the body. So to develop resilience, we want strength and reactivity in the tissues, but then also developing the proprioceptive feedback. So once you have the strength and you're getting that like gross information feedback, then you'll want to come back and work with the more subtle. So again, kind of like with the example of the kettlebells, you could start training with a little bit heavier weight, get the muscles stronger, and start that kind of gross information coming in, and then go back and back and back until you can execute complex functional movements without load in the same proper activation pattern. So again, then coming up and taking off the sandbag, for example, on your stomach and pushing the abdomen out just as much with your diaphragm, and building that control. Then after you've done that, you can complicate things by different positions of the body. So forward folds, extensions, like try a cobra and try that 3-part breath lying on your stomach. Not only are you going to have resistance on your belly because of the floor and gravity, but also that extension will challenge the activation of the muscles in the rib cage. You can do it with simple side bends, seated, trying to breathe along the muscles, and then that will help to develop muscle activation under challenge for the muscles. Then we want to talk about alignment and symmetry in the body, because the brain loves alignment and symmetry, and proper posture, because coming back to that idea of the tonic muscles being able to maintain posture, we want those always to be firing the best information to the brain as possible. That's going to help us build resilience, because if we're walking around or seated with our head this way, you don't listen in class in school like this.
Yeah.
Because your brain's not firing. You're lazy and thinking about something else. You sit up straight and you listen, because actually it turns on your brain. Those tonic muscles are firing, and it's allowing the different areas of your brain to fire because you have proper alignment. Your right side and your left side are both activating and helping your brain to be turned on. So that's going to help resilience, because you're constantly having more information going to the brain.
That's really cool. It's almost like, well, I'm thinking about how listeners can practically apply this. It's almost treating your breathing mechanics and muscles as an accessory piece to your normal training. Like you would do, say you're a runner, you do your strength work for your legs, but you also want to do some strength work for your breathing muscles. And is there any other way you can sort of integrate that higher up in towards your running so it holds up in a race? Like how might you, like, so you've lengthened and strengthened all the muscles that you breathe with, how do you then integrate that into your running style?
Oh, wow. So this is so important, because what we see in Chamonix with the endurance runners is that as they get tired, there's a slouching, and you're going to be less efficient in your breathing. And so working on the postural muscles, working kettlebell training is so great, because it's functional strengthening. And so you're working on keeping the spine straight so that you can have that alignment that not only allows proper activation biomechanically of all these muscle chains, building resilience, because when you are centered and braced and aligned, if I'm running, for example, and there's a big rock on the trail, and I'm running and I just don't see it and I step on it, if I'm braced and aligned, I'm going to be able to react better, because my muscles are ready, and my tonic muscles, the postural muscles, are going to give me proprioceptive feedback, higher or stronger proprioceptive feedback, so that I can more quickly react. If I'm slumped forward, already my core is not engaged, and I could twist my ankle or fall. And so we want to work those muscles so that they have more strength and endurance, so that you can go further if this is what you're training for. And then also have that resilience, because of your body awareness being higher. So you said it beautifully. It's your breathing is going to help your training, and your training is going to help your breathing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that the way I would think about that is almost like a reactive stability piece, in that balance is a skill that needs to be practiced. And you look at people who do trail running, and they are going to be stronger to resist ankle rolls and things like that, but they're also going to be more skilled because they detect that ankle roll sooner and contract the muscles that correct it sooner. So it's not just the fact that their tendons, ligaments, and muscles in that area might have built up more tissue tolerance. It's also the fact that they've done so many reps correcting that they're, that going back to that handstand analogy, they're able to correct the perturbance sooner, so it doesn't go so far before it's addressed. Where somebody who is tired and sloppy and loose, that ankle's going to roll a lot further before they even notice it's rolled, and then they don't have the skill or strength to bring it back into alignment as quickly.
Yeah. Well, and also that's exactly right. And cross training is only going to help athletes if you put in a couple days a week of doing an activity other than, for example, the endurance runner, of swimming. Swimming is great for the brain, by the way. Like these movements, these fluid movements, proprioception, you have that water as feedback all the time. Swimming is great for proprioception in the brain. But cross training, basically working movement patterns that you wouldn't expect to come up in the activity that you're doing is great in resilience, because then when the expected does come up, your muscles have fired in that different pattern. So cross training and movements that increase proprioception. Endurance runners might find this quite boring, but things like Tai Chi and yoga, developing proprioception in uh, strange positions is going to also help resilience.
For sure. Yeah, it's almost like, I think this guy called Ido Patel, who's a big pioneer in the movement space. He's like, you want to train the bad positions, and there are no bad positions, just ones that you're not yet resilient against. And so,
Oh, interesting.
if you think about the ways that you might get injured, you're almost rehearsing those so that you can
Mm-hmm.
recognize them earlier and correct them, but also build
Mm-hmm.
issue tolerance so you're more robust against them happening. So, whatever your sport is, you want to think about what the common injury mechanisms are and get yourself some graded exposure to them so that when those unfortunate incidents do happen, you're more prepared and robust against those things
Yeah.
occurring. So I think that's a really cool.
That's really interesting, because also you could look at building strength around an injury as just basically like rehabbing the tissues that have been damaged. So if you're prehabbing against those injuries, it makes sense. What have you used that with some of your training, people that you're training
For
for their
sure.
sports?
Yeah. I think that that approach informs a lot. Well, one of the things we do, and we call it stimulus six matrices, where basically whatever the core movement is, we deviate in all three planes of motion to basically have a systematic way of building a bigger comfort
Mm-hmm.
zone around that. So if we're doing lunges, for example, we'll do lunges in all six directions, all three planes of motion, both ways, so that our bodies have experienced the variation in loading on the tissues, but also the brain has recognized those shifts in balance. So if I lean too far left, how do I come back to center? If I lean too far right, how do I come back to center? And you can apply that process to any movement. And
Yeah.
if you're looking at running, you can do hop matrices where you're
Uh-huh.
hopping in different directions, forward, back, left,
Good.
right, and twisting. So you are rehearsing an off footstep, so your body knows how to land, absorb force, and actually keep going if you wanted to. So all of these
Yeah.
things are basically just a simple, systematic way to expose your body to the possible errors. Or we do one called the 3D deadlift matrix, where we're deadlifting usually using dumbbells rather than a barbell, but reaching forwards, back, left, right, and rotating. So
Mm-hmm.
again, if you pick up a bar or something heavy and it's not loaded how you'd want it to be and you're shifted over to one side, you've
Mm-hmm.
experienced what it's like to pick something heavy up with your hips over one side or twisting too far the other way, so you don't get
Mm-hmm.
that system shock, which can quite often be the trigger for the injury to occur.
Mm-hmm. Or doing functional training with an uneven surface under the feet also is
Yeah,
really good.
massively.
It makes me think of talking about resilience and injuries and the unexpected. Uh, a teacher of mine and colleague, he's teaching functional neurology techniques. He described resilience as, okay, if you're running, you're training for a 100-meter sprint, and the first time you do it correctly, you don't trip, you don't fall. This is great. You have the movement pattern. The second time you do it with like a weighted vest. This is great. You have strength, you have endurance. This is good. And then the third time, you have three people with pool noodles just whacking you from all directions.
Yeah.
And if you can keep running without failing or tripping or knocking your head to the side, this is resilience.
Okay.
So if you can load and do a deep squat with 50 kilograms
Yeah.
with people whacking you with pool noodles, this is resilience.
Yeah. It completely depends on what your sport is, but for contact sports like rugby or American football, then that's
Yeah.
real, like contact training, people with the tackle pads
Yeah.
out, and your ability to deal with those disruptions is a huge part of the sport. Don't know if
Yeah.
Usain Bolt would be doing much of that, but I think it's
You don't know. If he was training with Russ Hornstein, who
yeah.
practices in Lisbon, by the way, he's great. Go and see him if you ever are down there. Uh, I think he would have Hussein doing pool noodle sprints.
Okay. I have to give that a go to get a few noodles out.
Yeah.
One other thing that I think will help a lot of people that I wanted to pick your brains on is the digestive connection with breathing. We talked about how we get the massage of the digestive organs. How else can we leverage breathing to improve digestion with regards to recovery? Because I think that's an underestimated linkage of systems there.
Mm-hmm. Well, breathing affects digestion not only mechanically, but also chemically and physiologically and neurologically. So it's huge for digestion. So, of course, with posture, we're creating space for the abdomen to to execute peristaltism and have things move through the digestive tube. With activation of the diaphragm, we're getting that pumping action that's going to help the peristaltism to move things through. We're going to get proper blood flow also surrounding the tissues in the abdomen, but then also deep, full breaths, because it can create acidity in the body, is also, if you have generalized acidity, this is not great for digestion. It's going to cause inflammation and a whole slew of other issues. Also, just a note about nose breathing, which is very important. We'll do a third episode on nose breathing. The nitric oxide that you absorb when you do breathe through your nose is going to help your digestion, because you're going to have better blood flow as well. So that's another chemical way that breathing can affect your digestion. So nose breathing is better for blood flow, vasodilation, and digestion, and also going to help the contraction of the peristaltism. Have I covered the gamut of how breathing helps digestion? Definitely not, because the nervous system. So when we are having deep, full breaths, which, by the way, if you have too big of a meal, think of Thanksgiving, and you have a full belly, you're not able to breathe deeply. So small meals are better for breathing. Just a side note. But if you're having big full breaths, I'm like the mama, like teaching the kids, okay, small meals, breathe deeply. But big full breaths will bring you into parasympathetic autonomic nervous system activation. So it'll chill you out, allow you to digest better. And so, so breathing is very, very, very important for the digestion.
What are some, because I think anyone who follows any health accounts online will have heard the message that, you shouldn't be watching stuff, you shouldn't be distracted or playing on your phone while you're eating, so that you can actually enter this parasympathetic state to improve your digestion. Are there any best practices you'd recommend from a breathing point of view to settle into your meal and harmonize your breathing and digestive system?
Yes. So sitting up straight-ish when you're eating is great, because you're going to have good alignment, proper breathing patterns while you're eating. And then also, if you're able to breathe through your nose, this is hard if you have a cold, but if you're able to breathe through your nose while you're eating, that's going to help the taste and then satiation as well. So that's quite important. When you breathe through your nose, this is going to allow you to have proper alignment through your airways, proper alignment in your spine, and that's going to have a huge impact on your jaw as well. So chewing will be helped by proper breathing through the nose in the short term, like think of at the moment, but then over the long term, if you are nose breathing, that's going to help jaw movement as well. They did a study on macaque monkeys,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quite sad, but they basically plugged up their nostrils, and over the period of 6 months, they had complete deformation of the jaw because they were breathing without their teeth occluded. So it was like causing this entire reshaping of their skull and this kind of like forward saggy chin posture. So, but then when they took them away, they did come back. So if you start nose breathing, you're going to have stronger jawline, stronger jaw muscles, better activation of the jaw muscles, and that's going to help mastication because you won't fatigue as much, and you can get the 30 to 35 chews per mouthful that you need before you swallow, so that all of the digestive enzymes also get mixed in with the food, and then you can absorb better into the stomach. So yeah, nose breathing to help satiation, to help proper mastication biomechanics, for alignment, so that when that your small meal gets to your belly, then you can move it through the digestive tube. And finally, another meal tip for after the meal: get up and move. Walk after you eat, even within the 45 minutes after you eat. If you go outside or inside, if it's cold winter and you have a big place to walk. Anyway, side note, just walk by about 15 minutes. Better if it's closer to 30, but there might be, I don't know, social or family limitations there. But getting up and moving. But by the way, if there are family limitations, your kids should be doing this too. Walking is going to help stabilize blood sugar so that you can avoid big peaks after your meal. But then also getting up and breathing while you're walking is going to help the biomechanics and get you good chemistry for the digestion.
So for the chemistry, what do we want to be focusing on to breath-wise to balance the pH of our blood for the benefit of digestion?
Slower breaths and through the nose.
Okay.
It's going to help to bring your pH down. And then also, if you're training exhale retentions, that's also going to bring your pH down because you're basically bringing yourself into that CO2. Everybody should have listened to the first breathing episode if you're listening here, so you're up to date. But you're building your resistance to CO2 in the blood.
Okay.
So you're bringing your pH down because, let me see if I've explained this correctly. Does it make sense? Or
I'm just running it through my mind. So when you say bring the pH down, do you mean the number down or reduce the acidity?
reduce acidity. Sorry, that's why I mixed up. So you're reducing the acidity because you are basically training your cells to have cellular respiration in a more efficient way. Was that your question?
Yeah. Basically, how do we improve our pH for the benefit of digestion through breathing? So that's perfectly.
And another important way is hydrating. So you wouldn't want to drink a lot during the meal, basically drinking just small sips to help wash down the food. But hydrating before and after, like 15, 20 minutes before the meal, and then 30 minutes after, so that you have some time for the food to go through, so that you're not diluting the food and allowing all the digestive enzymes to go into it. But hydrating is super important for reducing acidity as well.
Okay.
So that's going to help you digest if you drink and hydrate well outside of the meal.
Very good tips. Yeah, I think out here in Bali, with everyone getting Bali belly, it sort of highlights the importance of digestion and how much it affects everything else if it's not on point. So very valuable lessons for people to learn. The last thing on my list that I wanted to ask you about was using breathing for burnout recovery. I think that's the thing that's becoming more and more of a big deal and affecting more and more people nowadays. They're getting burnt out in some way, shape, or form. And maybe I can ask another question at the same time. That the way I think in popular culture, breathing is chest breathing is stress, is sympathetic is bad, and belly breathing is parasympathetic is good. I think that's an oversimplification. I think I'm sure you'll address that. But how can we leverage what we know about breathing to get ourselves out of a burnt out state?
Okay. That's a really good way to frame the question, because yes, belly breathing is emphasized so much these days, which belly breathing is a great thing. But what I tell my patients in the office also is that when you do belly breathing exercises, you also want to do exercises that you're working all three areas of the breath, these three main areas of the belly, lower rib cage, and upper rib cage, just so that your body also is developing strength in all of the areas as well as the diaphragm, because belly breathing is really concentrated on this dynamic in the barrel between the diaphragm and then the core abdominal muscles and the pelvic floor. But you want to work all of the areas, because you don't want to just be breathing in your belly all the time. You want to be able to have the strength and the resilience to breathe in different positions throughout the day. Like if you're lifting a box or sitting at the desk or walking, you should be able to healthfully and harmoniously breathe in all of these activities. Or if you're doing the 100-meter sprint. But belly breathing can be a tool to not only strengthen the diaphragm, but then also bring the body into a different mode or nervous system state. And the breath is very interesting because it's the only autonomic function of the body that you can tell it what to do also. So if you think of your pupil dilation, I can't sit here and say, okay, pupils dilate, or okay, pupils constrict. You just can't do that. And then same with the heart rate. You can't just say, okay, heart, go faster. There are, yogis do this. They can control their heart, but it's actually through the control of the breath and calming down the system that they do that. So using the breath to explore different modes of functioning is really good for burnout, for example, because when individuals experience burnout, it's basically exhaustion from being in sympathetic way too much and for too long and for inappropriate times of day. For example, at night when they should be sleeping. If you're in sympathetic, this is going to be not conducive to sleep, rest, and digest. So the breath, whereas for burnout, when you're completely exhausted, it might be harder to arouse the body or get into an active state in the sense of being awakened or have the energy to move around, for example, in the morning. So using a breath that really oxygenates, so going into a full breath would be helpful earlier on in the day, because you're going to allow the body to wake up naturally with that. And by the way, do it outside, because getting sunlight on the skin is really good for you too. But then using other tools for burnout throughout the day, if you start to experience stress and peaks in your cortisol, you can feel your heart rate going faster, then you would want to use belly breathing or sighs to calm down. And in burnout, we would even, or for individuals experiencing burnout, we would even want to just kind of impose regular check-ins to breathe so that they can start to regulate the system, because the system is not going to be very efficient at staying in active states or resting states as it was before, because basically the adrenals are just shutting down and not functioning properly. So we want to keep reminding the body to wake up when it needs to, or to calm down when it needs to. So it's a really good way to develop those capacities in the body.
Very cool. And I know it's a piece of string question, and it massively depends person to person. But if somebody is very burnt out and they get on top of their sympathetic parasympathetic balance, what sort of time frames does it typically take for somebody to rest enough? Because I think most people who are burnt out are usually quite type A, quite go, go, go. And they'll see the burnout as like, oh, shit, this is just something I have to deal with. I want to get it over and done with as quickly as possible. And they'll be like, okay, if I'm going to take my foot off the gas, how long before I can push again? Is probably the primary concern for a lot of these people. Is there any frame of reference you've got there to help, or is it very much, it depends?
It's very individual, but what I would say to that question is that it doesn't have to be, like, for example, in France, I know that they give leave from work for several months for burnout. It doesn't have to be a matter of several months, especially if you do introduce some of these practices. Firstly, 3 days for the brain is kind of magic. Like, if you can get, this is, not available to all people, but if you can get 3 days, you can very often, 3 days of rest and like out of your typical routine, this can be magic already for the brain, just to get out, get different ideas, and kind of reboot the mental processes. And then in terms of retraining the system after burnout, it's really physiologically a question of the individual. But start slow, and if you can do a little reboot and take some time off, even if you can do longer than 3 days, that's great too. If you can take a week, 2 weeks off and go on a vacation, this is great. And for many of the Americans, this is like, what's a vacation?
2 weeks.
But already that's going to help your brain reboot, and then physiologically just keeping on it and taking a break every hour or max 90 minutes throughout the day to do 1 minute of breathing is going to make a huge impact. So don't be discouraged if you are experiencing burnout. These tools can help you, and you might bounce back much faster than you had thought.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that's probably something that a lot of people need to hear at the moment. Amazing. And that's been incredible. Thank you so much, Megan. Have you got anything you'd like to add? I think we've covered so much in terms of breathing for movement patterns, resilience of movement patterns and neurological resilience, digestion, now burnout. Anything else for this episode? I know there's probably plenty more we could get into another one.
Yeah, those would be my main tips: is schedule little breaks throughout the day, move and breathe, take breaks every hour or so, and take just 3 big full yogic breaths, and then 3 big belly breaths. That's already gonna help you so much. And then some of those tools that we talked about before, like the sigh, can help to reboot the system. The down regulation breath can help to relax. And then, if you're experiencing any of this burnout, reaching out to a practitioner who is trained in breathing and can look at also some of the biomechanical reasons why you're getting stuck in dysfunctional breathing, and you can't bring the system out of either sympathetic or parasympathetic states, that's going to help you too, so that you can have a very specific and precise plan
Mm.
to take
What
you out of that burnout.
what should somebody look for to figure out if somebody has a good knowledge of breathing or breath work? What are the
Mm.
things to look out for on their CV?
Well, it's not something that is regulated to this point in time, but there are different schools throughout the world. If you're in France, my teacher, Stefan Janssen, he is based in Annecy. He's running a really great school. So any of those practitioners that have gone through his course, we even dissected a pork lung. So it's really in depth. And so that's a good one. That's a reference point in France, but I'm not sure internationally. But for example, chiropractors, we are trained in breathing in school. It's going to be a biomechanical outlook, but then also PTs who have personal trainers who have experience with breathing. They'll have those kind of information on their CV. But it's very specific from country to country. There's not a regulation, and I don't know what all of the different schools are throughout the world.
Yeah.
So that's
It seems to be an interesting shift in a lot of these related industries, that there are these pockets of skill sets that people are sort of grabbing from different areas and making their own patchwork quilt of.
Yeah, and there are different types of breathing out there, breathing practices. So what we've been talking about is very biomechanical and physiological, but there are also spiritual kind of practices, because the typically it's called breath work. Also, this is a very different side of the practice, which can also be quite powerful. But if there's some physiological aspects to it, you might want to look for a practitioner that has a health view on that as well, rather than the purely spiritual side.
Yeah. Good advice. Megan, thank you so much for your time again. It's been a phenomenal chat, and I'm sure it'll help a lot of people. Can you give us a quick reminder of where people can get more from you, or if they swing by Chamonix, how to get in touch?
Oh, yes. So I'm here. I live in Chamonix and I have my office here. You can follow me on Instagram, Megan Rose Clayton Wellness. And yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have on breathing or movement or resilience, nervous system resilience as well.
Brilliant. Thank you again. And yeah, we'll look forward to part 3 at some point in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ash. It's good to talk to you.
So that's it for today's episode. Thanks again to Megan for another interesting and insightful exploration into breathing. Hopefully you come away with plenty of takeaways. I'm going to be lying on the floor and assessing your breathing at some point soon. Breathing and breathing mechanics and mechanics of the rib cage especially have become a topic of major interest for me in the last few years, and it actually forms part of our alumni syllabus because it's so impactful on the thoracic spine and shoulder and overhead mechanics. So I highly recommend learning more about breathing if you can. And as always, if you'd like to get the best free movement mechanics information on the internet, please check out our Skool community. The link will be in the descriptions below, but we have tons of information ranging from exercises of the week, short bite-sized pieces of information, all the way through to hour-long masterclasses on big topics like back pain. But that's it for this week. I'll catch you on the next one.